So Rabbi Zilgesundsen began the Farbrengen this afternoon, how Shabbos is a special day. Shabbos is a day of chidush. It's different than the entire week. And Shabbos also has an effect on the entire week, as the famous expression, Shabbos gives bracha into the entire following week. And when we're talking today, we're talking about a very special Shabbos, because it's the Shabbos which is at the end of the year, the Shabbos when we conclude the month of Elul. And the Rebbe brought a comparison where we find by the man, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu fed the Yidden in the Midbar, when the Yidden were in the desert after they went out of Mitzrayim, they were fed with the man daily. So we also find something very remarkable. We are told in Chazal tell us that the way the Yidden collected the man, they gathered the man, they accumulated their daily portions, there was differences. Not everybody got it as easy as the other one. Whoever was the category of the tzaddik, it was made easy for him to gather his portion. Whoever was in the category of the contrary of a tzaddik had hardships to put together his portion. But ultimately everybody was fed through the man. On the other hand, we find, the Rebbe explains that when they ate the man, we are told in Chazal that the man had no psoilus. In other words, there was nothing in the man which everything in it was pure and remained in the body. This part of the man was equal by everybody. In other words, regardless of what madrege he was when it came to gather the man, once he ate the man, as far as eating the man is concerned, here everybody is equivalent. Why? Because the man in itself was lechem min hashamayim. It's a godly food. I mean, it's a special food which HaKadosh Baruch Hu sent down from Shamayim to feed Bnei Yisrael. As far as the man is concerned, the man is in its same level by everyone. When we are talking about the recipients, that they differ, here we can find differences as far as which is expressed how they are accumulating their portions daily. However, when we're talking about the effect which the man has on the person who's eating the man, here the Rebbe is explaining this is equal by everybody. Why? Because the man in itself is lechem min hashamayim. So by man, we also find that the man is a chidush, it is tremendous accomplishment. Actually, the Rebbe did not refer to it at length, but obviously it is meant that in Chassidus it is explained that there is a comparison between the man and Shabbos. Because just like Shabbos, we sit back and everything is done, we're not allowed to do any melacha. Sheishis Yomim, for 6 days we do work, and come Shabbos, we are not allowed to do anything. The man is a reflection of the concept of Shabbos. Man is that the Yidden at that time did not work, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu provided them with all their needs through the man and through the other items which He gave them while the Yidden were in the Midbar. So there is a parallel between the man and Shabbos. That both of them are tremendous accomplishments. It's an introduction, it's a chidush, it's something new which was introduced by the Rebishter to Bnei Yisrael. And when we're talking on this Shabbos, when we're at the end of the month of Elul, after Yidden have been expressing one to another the wish for a ksiva v'chasim etova ready for an entire month, and if as the halacha which Rebbe quotes very often, that when one writes a letter to another, if the letter is written in the month of Elul, he should conclude with the wish of a ksiva v'chasim etova. So Yidden are wishing each other a ksiva v'chasim etova almost an entire month. So it is definitely fulfilled that the Rebishter will give everybody a good and healthy and blessed year. Here the Rebbe we're told in Shulchan Aruch tells us that Yidden, when it comes to Rosh Hashanah, we dress very nice. Shulchan Aruch uses the expression leivshim leveinim, Yidden dress in white clothes, or misatfin leveinim, which this is an expression of joy, of happiness. So what? On one hand, we're approaching HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu should give us and bless us for the new year. So it's a day of judgment. And on the other hand, we enter this day of judgment with such a definite feeling that we are kind of like guaranteed that the Rebishter is going to judge us and give a ksiva, vachsima, teiva to each and every one of us and enter us besifron shel tzadikim. And as the Rebbe added on, va'amech kulam tzadikim, all of Klal Yisrael are referred to as tzadikim. So Mamela, we are really confident that the Rebishter is going to give us a good year. This is the type of attitude we take right away, even from before Rosh Hashanah. So when it comes on this Shabbos, those Shabbos in general, it is explained, v'karosol Shabbos oineg, that Shabbos we are in a mood of oineg, of pleasantness. However, the Sifri also tells us, based on the pasuk, u'v'yoyim simchaschem, your days of simcha, so the Sifri says, what is considered days of simcha, elu ha-Shabbos. Shabbos is also simcha. What is the difference between oineg and simcha? Oineg is joy, pleasantness. Simcha is happiness. When we are in a mood of joy, it is basically a stable type of a mood. This is the type of a situation which we are in for Shabbos. When we say that Shabbos is not only oineg, but Shabbos is also simcha, simcha means an expression of I brought the pasuk, simcha peiretz geder. Simcha removes all boundaries. Any type of boundary could be removed through simcha. Even the boundaries of ani chayma zu Torah. What is considered a boundary by Yid? Chayma, a boundary is Torah. What moves away all barricades and all boundaries, and what opens everything? It's through the expression of simcha. We see when somebody is really simcha, is really rejoicing, then there is nothing which is interfering with him, then there is nothing which is in his way. Now, this Shabbos especially, this Shabbos we have to fulfill in a format, not only fulfill the karasa la Shabbos oineg, but also the expression of simcha, which this is where Yid has an opportunity to keep on going from madrege to madrege. And this is also reflected in this week's Sedra. Name of the Sedra is Nitzavim-Vayelech. As the Rebbe always stresses, when we have a combination of two Sedras, it is not two separate Sedras, it's both Sedras become one. So when we're saying this, the name of this week's Sedra is Nitzavim-Vayelech. So the Pashas Nitzavim begins, Atem Nitzavim Hayom Kulchem. We are all standing, all united, in the tone of Achdus. We are standing in front of whom? In front of the Melech. Now we can imagine there's no greater happiness by a person than when he could be standing in front of the Melech. Naturally here we're talking about Yidden we have all gathered to stand in front of the Melech Malach HaMelech HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This in itself brings simcha. And together with it we are told, Vayelech, Vayelech means to go. On one hand we say, Nitzavim, we're standing very firm. What is the name of the other half of the Sedra? It is Vayelech, to go. So this is the lesson that to every one of us, that a Yid constantly has to be a Yelech. We constantly have to be ongoing from Madrege to Madrege. Yelcho Machayel El Choyel, to keep on going from step to step, higher and higher. The Rebbe explained in detail, the pasuk by Vayelech is referring to Moshe Rabbeinu. When Moshe Rabbeinu was 120 years old, and Moshe Rabbeinu was about to pass away, Vayelech, and as Rashi comments, Hayoim Malu Yoma Yishnoiser, that Moshe Rabbeinu said that today he has fulfilled his age of 120 years. So even at such a madrege, Moshe is still in the level of Vayelech. In other words, he's fulfilled everything to the extent of Malu Yama Yishnoise. What does it mean his days are full? That means that all the 120 years which he lived on this world were all full days. He utilized every moment of every day. And after all of this, still the Peri uses the expression Vayelech Moshe. Moshe is going. Where is he going? He's going to a yet higher madrege. So Mamela, here we have the lesson as far as we are concerned, that on one hand we have to be in a level of Nitzavim, standing firmly in front of the Melech, and when we are in front of the Melech, this creates a tremendous feeling of simcha, because we were zeicha to be in front of the Melech, and together with it, the other half of the Sedra is Vayelech, which this is the reminder that we have to be Yelech mi madrega la madrega. The Rebbe concluded the Sikha with the the greatness of saying l'chaim. But when the Yid says l'chaim and gets a response of l'chaim v'levracha, one Yid saying to another one l'chaim, at the same time the Rabbeinu Shalom also hears the l'chaim, and the Rebishter answers the l'chaim of a Yid also with a wish of a l'chaim v'levracha and a wish of a ksiva v'chasim atov. Then the Rebbe continued that this year, the way we have the kvius of Rosh Hashanah is going to be next Shabbos and Sunday. So between this Shabbos and Rosh Hashanah, we have a full week. And this full week, naturally, we say Slichas every day. Now, there are some years where Rosh Hashanah comes out to be in the middle of the week. Then we would recite Slichas for more than 1 week. Rosh Hashanah comes out to be the early part of the week, then we say Slichas the entire previous week, plus the beginning of the following week when we have Rosh Hashanah. However, this year it is 1 complete week, which we have to prepare for Rosh Hashanah. And this is the year which we are parting from. In other words, this year which we are still in is a year as a Shana Ma'uberes, it is a leap year. This year we had 2 others. So it's a leap year. A Shana Ma'uberes, as the Rebbe stressed at many occasions, is not only is it reflected in the 2 months of Adar, but it means the entire year is a different one. It's a year where the Rebishter gives us an extensive amount of kaiches, more kaiches than we have in a regular year. So now when we are talking that we have a full week left to prepare for Rosh Hashanah, it has to be utilized properly, especially that the preparation for Rosh Hashanah is in the year which is a Shana Mu'beres. Because next year is not going to be a Shana Mu'beres, but this year, while we are still making the final touches and the final preparations for Rosh Hashanah, it is still a leap year. Memela, this is a year where the Rebishter has given us extra kaiches to be able to prepare. And Memela, this is also reflected in the idea when we are preparing for the new year. Then the Rebbe continued that today's day, Chav Gimel, 23 days in the month of Elul, is the yahrzeit of his grandfather. And though on one hand it's a personal matter, something personal, so it's the yahrzeit of his grandfather, but on the other hand he's going to explain how there are certain things about his grandfather which we can derive a lesson as far as we are concerned today as well. It's an interesting expression. The Rebbe expressed himself that being that he is referred to as the Rebbe Kaviyachol, that's the expression he used. So that is why in the Inyan, that though it's a private Inyan of his, it has a shaykhis to everyone as well. Regarding his grandfather, Rebbe continued, he was a Yoshev by the Rebbe Marash. What does it mean, a Yoshev by the Rebbe Marash? What is a Yoshev? In Yiddish it's translated as Zitzer. He was sitting by the Rebbe Marash, and the Rebbe explained exactly what happened. But after his grandfather got married, he walked or traveled, however the situation was then, to Lubavitch, where the Rebbe Marash lived, and he spent a long time sitting and learning in the surroundings of the Rebbe Marash. And here the Rebbe went into a lengthy explanation. Said that years ago, it was an understood practice by everyone. Everybody understood and realized that when we're talking about a yeshiva bacher, a yeshiva boy, his inyan is to sit and learn. Memela, when he's sitting and learning, there is no time that he's not learning. The only thing is, being that we have to take care of our health as well, the Torah commands us to take care of our health. Ushmartem mo'ed lenafshasechem, we are supposed to watch our health. Therefore, in the schedule of yeshiva, there is time which is allotted for eating, and there's a time which is set aside for sleeping. But a yeshiva bacher who is really involved in learning would always even take part of this so-called free time and also be involved in learning at that time. This was the attitude of a regular yeshiva bacher. To talk about this at a Chassidische Farbrengen generations ago. In other words, when we talk about something at a Farbrengen, that means we are reminding the people that this is something which has to be done, this is something which has to be strengthened, which needs chizuk. The Rebbe says that years ago it was an embarrassment to discuss this at a Chassidische Farbrengen. Why? Because it was something which was taken for granted by everyone, that this is the attitude how a yeshiva bach is supposed to act. He has no other inyan other than learn. Unfortunately, today it does have to be spoken about already. After one goes through the stage of being a yeshiva bach, then he gets prepared to go into married life. So the Rambam tells us that what is the schedule? How is the system? How does it go? Rambam says that first it has to be nota keren. First he has to make sure that he has the source of making a living to be able to provide parnasa once he will get married. Then the next step is bona bayis. He has to make sure that he has a house, a home where to live in. Then the Rambam continues, it's nosa yisha, then he gets married. Once a person gets married, he already has, as the expression in Shulchan Aruch is, rechayim al tzavor. He has a yoke on his shoulders. In other words, he has the oil ha-parnasa to bring parnasa to his wife, which this is the Rebbe added on right away, to his family, is an obligation which a person accepts in his ksubah, and this is min ha-Torah. Sheira ksusa ve'inosa lo yigra. This is one's obligation once he gets married. So on one hand, Take, he has to make sure to fulfill his obligation, and on the other hand, it was always an accepted practice by Yidden to have a kviyas item l'Torah. Every single day, every Yid knew that he had to have a certain part of the day set aside to learn. And though, when we are talking in times of quantity, in other words, on the watch, on the clock, he may have been occupied more than the hours that he was learning. He didn't have that much time to grab away from the day to be able to learn. However, a Yid always knew, as the expression goes, that this was a kviyus benefesh. This was something which he knew in his soul, that it is a must. The day can't pass, the day can't go by unless he has his shir in learning, and as it was customary by Yidden to have a kviyas item l'Torah in the morning and a kviyas item l'Torah in the evening. And otherwise a Yid knew that his day just can't pass. He had no interest in his day if he knew that he wasn't able to fulfill his obligation of learning a shir at least part of the day, a shir in the morning and a shir in the evening. And not like it is become today. The Rebbe says that people are busy, are occupied as far as providing parnasa for the family, and then when it comes to make a kviyas item l'Torah, here we are lacking in that area, and instead, the Rebbe used the expression, and instead one goes to a pizzeria. And this is something which definitely has to be corrected. Getting back to the attitude of his grandfather, what did his grandfather do? His grandfather, after getting married, left his home, which is in a way a sacrifice, mesiras nefesh, from the grandfather and from the grandmother, and went far away. Instead of being home the first year, we know v'simach es ishtay, there's an inyan of one not leaving his home the first year after he got married. Here it was upon mutual agreement of both of them that they were happy, and more than happy, that his Zayde should leave home and go a distance and spend the time by the Rebbe Marash. Which this, he says, is something very outstanding and very remarkable, how we find how an individual immediately after he got married, they were both willing and satisfactory. It was indeed besimcha that his Zayde left his hometown, wherever he lived, and went to the Rebbe Marash. As we got it from the story, obviously, he left his Baba at home, and he himself went to the Rebbe Marash and was a zitzer, as the expression is, and sat there for a long time and learned in the environment of the Rebbe Marash. As the Rebbe concluded, what happened later was he followed the tradition of his family, and just like his Zayde, in other words, meaning his Zayde, was a Paisek and Paskin Shailas, and clarified in Yonim and Halacha. The same thing with his grandson, also accepted a position in the rabbinate, a position in Rabbanis, and was also Paskin and Shailas, and later and gave guidance to Yidden. As it's customary in the Farbrengen that the Rebbe learns an Inyan in the Rashi of the week, as well as explaining a Mishnah in Pirkei Avos during the summer weeks, when today we finalize the reciting Pirkei Avos after Mincha, and also explains an Inyan in the Rambam in the daily Shir of Rambam. As far as the Inyan in Rashi, which the Rebbe raised the question, is in today's Sedre, where the Torah tells us about Hakel, which means that on the Sukkos, following the year of Shemitah, in other words, the 8th year, Shemitah is the 7th year, on the Sukkos, which follows the year of Shemitah, that is when the king is supposed to gather all of Klal Yisrael. Men, women, and children, even infants, everybody is gathered to Yerushalayim. And the Melech has to read specific parshiyas, specific parts of the Torah, in the presence of all of Klal Yisrael. Kapitel Amud Aleph, Pasuk Yud. It's right after Revi. Vayitzav Moshe Yisem, and Moshe is commanding them lamer as follows: Mikei Sheva Shanim, at the end of 7 years, b'Moyed Shnas HaShmita, at the time after the Shemitah year, b'Chag HaSukkos, when it is Sukkos, b'Voi Kol Yisrael Eroes Es Pnei Hashem Elokecha, when all the Yidden come to the Eibishter, to Yerushalayim. In other words, everybody comes to the Beis HaMikdash for Sukkos. Where does everybody come? B'Mokom Asher Yivchan, the chosen place, which this is the Beis HaMikdash. Tikras HaTorah Azois Neged Kol Yisrael Be'eznei. So Rabbi raised a very simple question, and he says, can't understand why nobody even thought of this question. It's a very obvious question. Just like at times the Rebbe explains a Rashi in detail, some other times he raises a question on an Inyan which is something which needs a clarification, something which needs an explanation, and obviously Rashi should have raised the question and explained it. The Torah is trying to give us here a date when Hakel is. Torah should have said very simple. Why go into all these details? Mikei Sheva Shanim, b'Moyed Shnas HaShmita, b'Chag HaSukkos. Torah could have said it very briefly. B'Chag HaSukkos shel Shana Shminis. The 8th year, the Sukkos of the 8th year, that is when we are supposed to make Hakel. Why so many details in the Torah? Rashi explains something on this pasuk, but Rashi does not explain this question: why is there a need for the Torah to get into such specific details when Hakel took place? Truth is, the Gemara asks this question. This question is raised in the Gemara. Kol hane lamali. Why do we need such a detailed breakdown when Hakel is? Obviously, if the Torah would have said that it is the Sukkos of the 8th year, we would have known exactly when Hakel is without getting into all these details. The fact that the Gemara asks it, the Gemara is limud al pi derech halacha. Now what we are learning is limud al pi derech hapshat. Rashi's Inyan Chumash is to explain al pi pshuta shel mikra, the realm of the simple understanding of the pasuk. As far as the simple understanding of the pasuk, the question arises: why does the pasuk have to elaborate in such detail when Hakel was, when it took place? So the Rebbe is learning. The idea here in the Torah is, the idea of Hakel was to bring together all of Klal Yisrael and inspire them to serve the Eibishter. The Melech got up in front of Klal Yisrael and read various portions of the Torah. What was the idea of him reading these portions in the Torah? So that Klal Yisrael would become warmer to fulfillment of Torah and mitzvahs. To put some inspiration to everyone, every member of Klal Yisrael. Everybody was there, men, women, children, everyone. And this kind of warmed everyone up to the fulfillment of the will of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Abba continues, a child who is learning Chumash is well aware that there are certain things which happen when which create a type of an enthusiasm in his life. For example, A child knows when he enters a new grade or he gets a new Rebbe, this a kind of like refreshes him, and he comes in with a new enthusiasm into his new grade. And therefore, the child also makes certain decisions now that he was promoted, he's in a new class, he will learn better than he learned in the past, he will dedicate himself more to his studies. The child understands that when certain major things happen, this is a call for a kind of an enthusiasm, an inner enthusiasm within the person. And this is what the Torah here is stressing. Vayitzav Moshe Eisam Leimer. Rabbeinu Shalom is, through Moshe, is relating to Klal Yisrael. There are various inyanim here, which all of these components put together are a good reason for the celebration of Hakel. First of all, you should know it's Miketz Sheva Shana. It's at the end of 7 years. You have gone through a cycle of 7 years. How is the cycle of 7 years set up? For 6 years, we work. Sheish shonim tizra sadecha, v'sheish shonim tizmer kamecha, and it comes to the 7th year. The 7th year is a year of Shemitah. What does it mean it's a year of Shemitah? It's a year of rest. What do Yidden do when they rest? When Yidden rest, this in itself is a year of dedication to Torah. So, when Torah is stressing, it is Miketz Sheva Shana. 7 years have gone by, and it's the end of the year of Shemitah. And also, Shemitah has just passed, when Shemitah is a year, not a working year, not a year of Tizra Sadecha and Tizmer Karmecha, but it is rather a year of a sabbatical year. It is a year of spiritual involvement for each and every year. Also, B'Chag HaSukkos. It is the Yontif of Sukkos. It's an outstanding Yontif. What does it mean, Sukkos? Sukkos Yidden are occupied. What are Yidden occupied with? They're occupied with mitzvahs. They're occupied with Daled Minim. They're occupied with going in and out of the sukkah. In other words, we are talking about a time which is an outstanding spiritual time. It's a perfect time to look for a spiritual elevation. Right after a Shemitah, and the time of Sukkot, and then the pasuk doesn't stop. It's also a time of Bevay Kol Yisrael, Le'roes es Pnei Hashem Elokecha. It's a time when every Yid comes to see godliness. Where do they all come? The place where HaKadosh Baruch Hu has chosen. Where did HaKadosh Baruch Hu choose? The Beis HaMikdash. So, not the pshat that the pasuk is kind of talking extra words, or giving us elaborating on the details, on the date when we celebrate Hakel. The Torah is trying to stress why this is a perfect timing for the celebration of Hakel. And that is why the pasuk here goes into all of these details, because the pasuk is explaining how there is no better spiritual time to celebrate Hakel than this time here, which the Kadosh Baruch Hu set aside. And that is why the Torah is stressing all of these details, not that otherwise we wouldn't know the date. The Torah could have given us a very brief date. The Torah could have said, Sukkot of the 8th year and finished. No, the Torah wants to stress why is this a suitable time for the Yid to look for an enthusiasm and a spiritual elevation, to elevate himself and to go higher and higher in the service of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that is why the Torah lists all of these details. We will come to the Mishnah and Pirkei Avos. Today we recited the 5th and 6th Perek after Menachah, because today is the last week this year of saying Pirkei Avos. So this last cycle we combine 2 prakim together in order that we finish the 6th Perek before Rosh Hashanah. Talking about 2 prakim, Rabbi raised the question. We know that before every Perek, when we recite Pirkei Avos, we say to Kol Yisrael. Kol Yisrael yesh lo chelek l'olam haba. At the end of every Perek, we say Rab Chananya ben Akashim. Now the question arises, when we say 2 prakim, is there a need to say Rab Chananya ben Akashya twice? In other words, once after the first and once after the second. And the same question regarding Kol Yisrael. Should we say Kol Yisrael again when we begin the 2nd Perek? So the Rebbe wanted to compare this to the combination of 2 sedras. Just like what we had today. 2 sedras were combined, and they become one long sedra to such an extent that the person who's called to Revi makes the first bracha in Pashas Nitzavim, and the closing bracha he makes in Pashas Vayelech. So obviously we could say the same thing when we recite 2 prakim of Pirkei Avos, that it is enough to say, sufficient to say the Kol Yisrael at the beginning of the first parak and conclude with the Reb Hananya ben Akashya when we say the last parak, and not say anything between the first and the second. However, the Rebbe says, this type of an interpretation would be satisfactory when we're talking in all of Pirkei Avos. Today, when we are combining the 5th parak and the 6th parak, it may be different. Why? Because the Pirkei Avos, the Masechta of Pirkei Avos, is really 5 prakim. The 6th is not Pirkei Avos. It is something which the Chachamim have added on. It is a Baraisa. It is only Shonu Chachamim Bilshein HaMishnah. It's the Baraisa which was set up very similar to Mishnah. And the reason we say it is because it tells us all the great things about learning Torah. And that's why it was also instituted as part of Pirkei Avos, but it really is not Pirkei Avos. Pirkei Avos is, if you were to take a Gemara and look up the Pirkei Avos, we will see that Pirkei Avos consists only of 5 prakim. This 6th parak is a Baraisa. In fact, the title to this Baraisa is, when we refer to this Baraisa, it's Kinyan Torah. It's the title, how we acquire Torah. So here the Rebbe says perhaps it's different. Being that it is not one inyan, we can't compare it to like one Sedra which is being combined, 2 Sedras which combine into one. So here it may be different. Perhaps here we should say Reb Hananya when we finish the 5th parak, say again Kol Yisrael before we begin the 6th, and then conclude again with a Reb Hananya. Anyways, Rebbe gave an opinion this way and explained that it is not clear how we are really to act in this specific case. Perik Hamishi begins with Ba'asara Mamoris Nivra. Kadosh Baruch Hu created the world with Asara Mamoris with 10 quotations. Umat Talmud Loima. Mishnah goes on, Kadosh Baruch Hu could have really created the world with 1. So first of all, it's very obvious the shaykhs of this Mishnah to Rosh Hashanah. We don't have to go any further. Because here we're talking about the creation of the world. This is what Rosh Hashanah is all about. But the Rebbe did ask a question. We know in Hebrew there is Dibur and Amira. Vayomer or Vayedaber. What is the difference between Vayomer and Vayedaber? Amira is Lashon Raka, is a soft way of talking. Dibur is a stricter way of talking. In other words, if we were to apply the expression of din and rachamim, strictness, gvura, and pity, rachmanis, amira would lend itself when it's an expression of rachmanis, dibur would lend itself when it's an expression of din, of gvura, a strict type of a message. Now we know that when HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world, Chazal tell us, B'tchila, initially, HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted to create the world b'midas hadin, with a strict approach, with a din. Ra she'eino olam miskayim b'midas hadin, shitafim b'midas harachmim. It's a famous medrash which is often quoted in Chassidus. When HaKadosh Baruch Hu realized that the world will not be able to exist on midas hadin, that is when he also blended in rachmim, rachmanis, pity. So the Rebbe explained that the pshat in this medrash is, it doesn't mean that first HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world b'midas hadin. After creating the world, that is when he realized it cannot exist on din only. That is when HaKadosh Baruch Hu blended in also midas harachmim. It is not so. The pshat is HaKadosh Baruch Hu knows everything in advance. So, but tchila, when he wanted to create the world, he wanted to create the world b'midas hadin. Ra she'eina ela miskayim b'midas hadin. When he saw that the world will not exist b'midas hadin, this he realized even before the creation of the world. Shitafim b'midas harachmim. When was that? Also before the creation of the world. So now, when we have here the expression of Ba'asara Ma'amoris Nivra, and Maimar, Amira, is an expression which is used when we are talking Dvarim Rakim by a soft-spoken message, this is already based on the fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu was shitaf midas harachamim together with midas hadin. Because if the way that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted to create the world initially, only b'midas hadin with a strict approach, then the expression here of ba'asaram amoris nivra olam is not the right expression. It's not suitable, because then we shouldn't use the expression that HaKadosh Baruch Hu used ma'amoris. HaKadosh Baruch Hu used dibrois. Being that the Mishnah does use the expression ba'asaram amoris, this is an indication that the Mishnah is talking the final stages of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's creating the world was not only based on midas hadin, but also on midas harachmim, shitafim midas harachmim. That is why the Mishnah uses the expression of ba'asaram amoris, because an amira vayomer is used by dvarim rakim. The Rebbe tied it also to the conclusion of the sixth parak, the siyum. Kol ma shabara Kadosh Baruch Hu ba'olamai, everything which Kadosh Baruch Hu created in this world, lo baroi ela l'chvode, was only created in His honor. The relation between this and the beginning of Perek Hamishi is very obvious. Perek Hamishi discusses how HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world. What was the ultimate goal of HaKadosh Baruch Hu creating the world? Kol ma shabara HaKadosh Baruch Hu ba'olamai, everything that He created was created only in His honor. In other words, everything in this world was created to be utilized for the service of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So the contents of the beginning of Perek Hamishi and the contents of the end of Perek Shishi, to tie these two together is extremely obvious. Farbrengen, the Rebbe also, as is customary, explained the Shir and Rambam, the daily Shir Rambam, and today it is in the halachas of Parah Aduma. Soft spoken. The halachas of Parah Aduma is a choik. It is a mitzvah which we do not understand the reason for it. The Rambam tells us that Shlomo HaMelech was looking to explain for reason for all of the mitzvahs. Still, there was one mitzvah which even Shlomo HaMelech, the smartest of all people, the Chacham Mikol Adam, was not able to explain. And this is obviously the mitzvah of Parah Aduma. Rabbi explained a few points in the mitzvah of Parah Aduma. And one he stressed on and elaborated on this afternoon. By Parah Aduma we find a very interesting thing. We find by Parah Aduma, what is the whole idea of a Parah Aduma? We take the parah, it has to be a red one. The Torah tells us all the details, how to go about and process it, and then the ashes of the Parah Aduma was sprinkled on a person who became tameh, one who became not pure. By sprinkling these ashes on him and all the other ingredients which the Torah tells us, the one who was not pure, the one who was tameh, would become tahir. However, there's another side to this thing. Whoever is involved in the making of the Parah Aduma, whoever participated in all the details of processing the Parah Aduma, became tameh. In fact, this is one of the things which is not understood about Parah Aduma. If Parah Aduma has the power to bring tahara, to bring purity to the one who is tameh, why should it be metameh the one who is tahir? But this is a fact. This is the halacha. This is what the Torah tells us. Mitaheres es atmeim, or metameis es atahira. The one who was pure, who was tahir, by getting involved on the Parah Aduma, becomes non-pure, becomes tameh. A person who was tameh, for whatever reason, whether he touched a dead body or any other type of reason which made him tameh, that particular person, through the Parah Aduma, will become tahir. So the Rebbe explained it spiritually, explained as follows. And he compared it to a few different areas. We find in the Megillah, which we read on Purim, we find how Haman talked to Achashverosh to come out with this decree on Yidden. And finally it reached Mordechai, and Mordechai was looking for a way to get to Esther, that Esther should get to the Melech Achashverosh and see to it that it is changed. So there's an expression in the Megillah, Vayisaper Mordechai, that Mordechai related Eis Kol Asher Karahu, everything that happened to him. Told Esther everything related to Esther, everything that happened to him, and therefore begged from her that she should see to it to go ahead and save Klal Yisrael. On the previous occasion, the Rebbe explained this at length and referred to it today. It is self-understood, Mordechai at that time was an uncle to Esther. In other words, the queen was his niece. Mordechai had what we would call, he had an in. If Chas v'Sholem, something would happen to Klal Yisrael, Mordechai, as far as he himself being concerned, as far as his personal life, Mordechai would have been safe. After all, he had somebody who would worry for him, somebody who would find a way. He was the one who raised Esther. Esther had no parents, so she was indebted to Mordechai, and definitely that Esther would have done something to go ahead and help her uncle. Still, we see that this was not the attitude that Mordechai took. Mordechai took an attitude, if there's something which is chas v'shalom harmful to Yidden, it is karahu. It is just like it happened to him. He could have saved himself, he could have gotten his way out, and to him it wouldn't have no effect. No, it is not so. This is not the attitude of a responsible Yid. When a responsible Yid hears of a fellow Jew being in some kind of Yitzhar Rachmana litzlan, it has to affect him just like as if it would be him. And that is why the Megillah is so specific, using the expression Asher Karahu. Mordechai related what has happened to him, mamish like it happened to him. Or another example, we recited in today's Haftarah, in today's Maftir. There's a pasuk, Bechol tzarasam lo tzar, and all the tzaras which Yidden have, all the golus and all the problems which Yidden have, loy would avav. To him, meaning to whom? To the Rabbeinu Shloim, he is also in the same pain, in the same tzara, in the same engshaft, together with Yid. The Rabbeinu Shloim is the Rabbeinu Shloim, and Yidden are Yidden. But this is not how it works. When it is inconvenient for Yidden, when Yidden have problems, when it is tzaras, Rachmana litzlan, for Yidden, when it is eng for Yidden, when it is bitter for Yidden, chas v'shalom, it is bitter for HaKadosh Baruch Hu as well. The same the Rebbe says. When we go out and we want to uplift a person who was in the category of being a tamei, and we want to bring him to purity, we want to be mitayr, the one who was tamei, we have to associate ourselves to him to such a degree that we also have to know what tumah is. If we will just put ourselves lock ourselves up and not have no shaykhs to that person who is now tamei, and we will not stretch our arm out to go out and help him, then we will not know what is the taste and the meaning of tumah, and therefore this will hold us back. We wouldn't want to have any shaykhs to him. If we wouldn't have any shaykhs, we wouldn't have any relation to that person, we wouldn't have any contact to him. Therefore there will be nobody that will help the tamei become tahir. The Rebbe compared it. There's a very famous story from the Mittler Rebbe. The Mittler Rebbe, the Alter Rebbe's son, was once in another city, and he was seeing Chassidim on Yechidus. And Chassidim came into him, each one with their particular inyanim, their particular matters, and discussed it with the Mittler Rebbe, and they walked out right after. And there was a whole group of Chassidim, a whole line of Chassidim which were going in for Yechidus. After the Yechidus with one particular Chassid, the Mittler Rebbe asked for Yechidus to be stopped for a while. He stopped seeing people for a while, and it took a while until again he told the Shabbos to open the door and again let more people come in for Yechidus. At a later occasion, the Mittler Rebbe was asked to explain why was it that he stopped that specific time in the middle of the night. It was the middle of seeing people. People were going in and going out. And here he stopped for a while and did not see Chassidim for an hour or so. What made him do that? So he said, I will tell you. When a chassid comes into him, seeking for an advice, and many a times chassidim ask a rebbe a tikkun, a correction for various wrong things they have done previously throughout their life, he says he has to find within himself bidakis, in a very fine, in a very thin way, something similar to what this chassid is asking him to give him guidance in. Otherwise, he has no shaykhs, there's no contact between him and this particular chassid. Once he finds something in common between himself and this particular chassid who is asking guidance, and something in common has to be on this particular inyan which the chassid is asking for, then he could give him the proper advice. It happened to be, the Mittel Rebbe continued, that this particular individual came into him to ask for a correction, to ask for a tikkun on such averes which was so far from him, so remote from him, that in no way did he realize, did he find any shaykhs between himself and that chassid. Even how we would search bedakis and bedakis to dakis in a very reduced way, in an extremely reduced way, still he said he couldn't find anything. And therefore he asked to stop for a while. He should be able to think into the matter and find how he has some sort of a shaykhs in a very refined and reduced way to this specific inyan which that chassid asked for, so that he should be able to give him the proper guidance. The same the Rebbe says when we're talking about in the inyan here of paraduma. There is a need that paraduma should be mitames atahoirem, the one who is till now he's a Torah, but being that he is going out to bring Tara to the one who is Tameh, to the one who is not pure, and he's going to uplift him to the level of purity, to a level of Tara. So this individual also has to have a kind of a taste of Tumah like within him, so that he should be able to, may I use the expression, to appreciate and to have a shaykhs to the other individual who is still on the level of Tumah, to be able to uplift him and bring Tara to him. Interesting, in the Farbrengen, later when the Rebbe was again talking regarding Rosh Hashanah, how we are asking HaKadosh Baruch Hu to give a good and healthy year, we are confident from the Rebbe that He will. The Rebbe says that though there are many, many blessings which we are requiring from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but the best way to set it up is in the format of Aleph Beis. In other words, a bracha for each individual letter. In fact, recently this summer, in a few Farbrengens already, was Chaf Av and the later Farbrengen. And today as well, how the Rebbe explained an inyan of bracha for every letter in the Aleph Beis. Beginning with Shnas Eira, should be a year of lichtigkeit, an illuminated year, spiritually as well as physically. Beis, a Shnas Bracha, a Shnas Gila, Gimel, a year of joy. Ditza, which is another expression for joy. Hoid, which means pride, obviously. Hoid v'hada, also an inyan of pride and beauty. Va'atoiv, everything should be based on good decisions. Zayin is zochiyes, mitzvahs. Ches is chaim toivim aruchim, long and good years. Tes is tahara, should be a year of purity. Yi'ud, Yu'udim, in other words, good fulfillments, everything should be fulfilled properly in toiva, nira, v'anigla, in good and obvious good, tangible good. Kalkala, meaning economically, everything, Eden should have parnasa and all of their needs in parnasa. Lamet, meaning a year of limud, a year of learning. Mem, meroimemes, a year of uplifting. Nun, a year of nisim gluyim, of obvious miracles. Samach, a year of siyata d'shmaya, we should get assistance from the Rabbeinu Shalom. Ayin, oiz v'hoda, a year of strength. A year of pei, pedus, meaning being redeemed, the year of the Geula. Tzahala, tzaddik, a year of joy, of simcha. Also tzaddik tzedakah, we should be able to give a lot of tzedakah. Kuf, a year of kedusha, a year of holiness. Also koimimius, a year where we should be uplifted, spiritual uplifting. Reish, roimemus, also uplifted. Koimemius is more specific. Koimemius is there's an expression of koimos skufa. We should be able to go really with our heads up. In other words, it means spiritually as well as physically, totally being taken out of Gullus and no longer being in exile, having any yoke of exile upon us. And also concluding with a shin, a year of simcha, a year of freilichkeit, a freiliche year. And tov, it should be a year of tshuva, Torah, and tehillah, a year of praise, tshuva, and Torah. A good year and aksiva v'chsima Torah.